Part 1. The moment you stop hoping to be understood. There comes a quiet, irreversible moment, not loud, not cinematic, when a person finally stops hoping the world will understand them. It isn't dramatic. There's no applause, no witness, no music swelling behind it. Just silence. The kind that seeps into your bones when you realize no one is coming to fix it. No one is staying up at night thinking about your pain. And in that silence, something ancient stirs. A kind of strength that doesn't beg, doesn't explain, and doesn't need to be seen. That's the turning point. When you stop performing and start becoming, the world may remain indifferent, but you don't have to be powerless. The Stoics understood this long before us. They believed that real power begins when expectation dies, and in that death, your true life finally begins. If you're someone ready to stop chasing validation and start building inner strength, consider subscribing, not as a click for attention, but as a quiet vow to yourself. A small commitment to discipline, clarity, and self-respect. Because here, we don't chase applause. We build what the world cannot ignore. Most people carry a quiet fantasy that their suffering is visible, that if they hurt enough, someone will notice, that maybe if they just explain it perfectly, someone will understand. It's a soft hope, woven into the way we're raised. If I'm in pain, the world will care. But life happens. Pain goes unseen. Tears dry without witness. The phone stays silent. And that's when something shifts. You start to see the illusion for what it truly is. Not a reflection of your worth, but a reflection of how consumed others are by their own chaos. Everyone is battling something invisible. Just as they'll never fully see yours, you'll never fully see theirs. So if you build your identity on being seen, you'll spend your life feeling invisible. That ache of being overlooked, it isn't cruelty, it's reality. And if you look closely, it might just be trying to teach you something vital. When we're young, we believe pain deserves recognition. We think suffering earns us comfort. But life doesn't hand out medals for endurance. It doesn't send angels when you collapse. It just moves on. People keep scrolling, friends forget, not out of malice, but because they're drowning in their own storms. It sounds harsh, but harsh doesn't mean untrue. And that truth, painful as it is the first real step toward freedom. Because once you stop expecting the world to respond to your pain, you stop waiting. You stop freezing your life in hopes that someone will notice you're stuck. You begin to move again, for reasons that have nothing to do with applause. Carl Jung once said, "The world will ask you who you are, and if you don't know, the world will tell you." But what he didn't say, what experience eventually reveals, is that most people don't ask because they care. They ask so they can fit you into a box that makes sense to them. They don't see you. They see their idea of you. And when you stop performing for that gaze, you finally start living for something real. There's a strange kind of sorrow in realizing you're not the main character in anyone's story, but your own. It's not rejection. It's gravity. No one owes you understanding. No one is required to hold your hand through the fog. And while that can make the world feel colder, it also makes your inner fire burn brighter. Because now you're the one lighting the torch. No more waiting for someone to read between the lines of your silence. No more hoping that your quiet breakdown will be noticed and mended by someone who just gets it. You get it now. And that changes everything. That disappointment, the one that used to sting, becomes something else. It becomes clarity. And clarity, my friend, is the first real form of freedom. This is where the Stoics found their strength. Not by being untouched by pain, but by refusing to outsource their healing. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "Do not waste what remains of your life in speculating about your neighbors." In other words, stop hoping others will see your wounds and name your worth. The more you focus on being seen, the less you see yourself. And ironically, the more invisible you become. You turn into background noise in someone else's story, when you were meant to be signal in your own. But when you finally let go of the hope that someone else will witness your suffering and give it meaning, that's when you begin to build something indestructible. Not because you've hardened, but because you've become clear. You begin to notice how much of your identity was built around being seen, around the quiet belief that someone, somewhere should care, and when they didn't, you took it personally. But here's the truth most people never learn. Just because others don't care doesn't mean you are unworthy. It simply means they are human, flawed, distracted, overwhelmed, just like you. The game was never about being seen. It was about waking up to the fact that you've been the observer all along. You've always been the one watching. You've always been the witness of your own thoughts. That's not a curse. That's a gift. Because it means you, not them, hold the power to change the story. There is power in being unseen. Clarity in walking without an audience. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." That's what happens when you stop hoping to be seen. You start becoming. Not for attention, not for validation, but because something inside you refuses to stay small. The pain that once crushed you becomes blueprint. The silence that once haunted you becomes teacher. The solitude that once frightened you becomes home. And when that shift happens, you no longer need to broadcast your wounds. You just carry them differently, not as burdens, but as proof that you kept going. Maybe then, being overlooked wasn't a tragedy. Maybe it was initiation, the slow, quiet death of illusion, and the first breath of something real, something that no longer seeks validation, because it's too busy building permanence. You don't need to be seen to become something great. You need only to see yourself clearly, honestly, without decoration. That's where everything begins to change. That's where your real life finally starts. Narrator. When no one listens, something unexpected happens. You start listening to yourself. Not the surface voice that echoes what others expect, but the quieter one beneath it. The voice you ignored because it wasn't loud enough to compete with the noise of the world. But in the absence of applause, silence grows roots. You begin to hear your own thoughts more clearly, not as background noise, but as guidance. It's strange at first, uncomfortable even. You've spent so long checking your reflection in the eyes of others, and when those eyes turn away, you're forced to see yourself from the inside. And that's when everything changes. You begin to move differently, not because someone told you to, not because someone believed in you, but because you've decided to show up without witnesses, without cheerleaders, without someone holding the door open. Self-reliance doesn't arrive with fanfare. It doesn't roar into your life. It creeps in quietly, disguised as loneliness. You wake up one morning and realize no one's checking in, no one's asking how you're doing. And instead of falling apart, you start building. You begin to take yourself seriously, not because others do, but because you've grown tired of waiting for permission. How many times have you paused your own growth, hoping someone else would tell you it's time, that it's safe to begin, that it's the right direction? But what if that permission never comes? Would you stay frozen forever? Or would you finally claim the authority that was always yours? That's where real power begins. Not in being chosen, but in choosing yourself. The world trains us to chase validation like it's oxygen, but the Stoics knew peace isn't found in popularity, it's found in discipline. Epictetus said, "No person is free who is not master of themselves." Freedom doesn't come from being supported. It comes from knowing that even when you aren't, you'll keep going anyway, not out of bitterness, but out of respect for your own potential. When you understand that showing up stops being performance, it becomes an act of self-respect. And in that quiet shift, a new relationship begins, not with the world, but with your own mind. You start to trust it again. You listen to it. You ask it what it needs. You stop outsourcing your intuition. You stop living reactively. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." That awakening doesn't come as a lightning bolt. It comes in small, steady decisions, each one laying another stone beneath your feet. You start keeping promises to yourself. You go for the walk. You write the words. You say no when something drains you. These aren't loud acts, but they build something unseen, something sacred, trust. And trust in yourself, that's the true currency of freedom. There's a quiet kind of strength that develops when you realize you are your own backup plan. When silence no longer scares you. When you stop needing to announce every move or explain every feeling. When you stop begging for someone to notice that you're trying, because you know. You know the effort you're making. You know the storms you've survived. You know what it took to still be here. Choosing growth instead of collapse. That's not arrogance. That's integrity. There will still be moments of doubt. Moments when you wish someone would look you in the eyes and say, "I see you." But now, you don't depend on it. You no longer crumble in its absence. You carry yourself with quiet awareness. You've earned your own respect, and that's rare. That's what makes people pause when you walk into a room. Not because you demand attention, but because your energy says, "I don't need it." Seneca once wrote, "The greatest empire is to rule oneself." To rule yourself doesn't mean perfection. It means consistency, especially when no one is watching. That's what it looks like. Doing what matters even when it goes unseen. Holding your standards high even when the crowd has none. And when you build from that place, you stop needing external structures to hold you up. Because now, you are the structure. You don't collapse when someone pulls away. You don't unravel when someone misunderstands you. Because your foundation was never built on their understanding. It was built on clarity, on quiet decisions made in solitude, on the strength of waking up and moving forward again and again, because that's who you've chosen to be. And here's the most important part. Once you begin to rely on yourself in this way, you stop resenting others for not being who you needed. You release them. You stop waiting for them to return, to notice, to explain. You no longer tie your progress to their presence. You move regardless, not with coldness, but with grace. This is freedom. Freedom not because the pain has vanished, but because it no longer defines the path. You carry it, but it doesn't carry you. That's what real self-reliance looks like. Not the absence of need, but the presence of inner steadiness. Even if no one sees you, even if no one comes, even if no one helps. You keep going, because this life is yours to live, and you will not wait for anyone to give you permission to become who you were always meant to be. We live in a world that rewards exposure. Every feeling must be shared, every wound displayed, every moment of struggle packaged into something others can scroll through. The more visibly broken you are, the more attention you receive. But not all attention heals. Some attention is hollow, temporary empathy that leaves you emptier than before. It keeps you performing your pain to stay connected. And slowly, without realizing it, you turn your suffering into spectacle. You start editing your wounds, presenting them neatly so they're palatable, relatable, consumable. But it doesn't bring you closer to others. It just turns your healing into public property. What was sacred becomes content. What was once your private soul becomes entertainment. There's a difference between honesty and performance. One comes from depth, the other from habit. And most of us were never taught the difference. We confuse expression with healing. We think that just because we talk about a wound, we've worked through it. But sometimes, the more you speak of it, the more it stays alive. Not everything needs to be narrated. Some things need to be felt, endured, integrated in silence. The Stoics weren't emotionless. They were composed. They believed in feeling deeply, but not letting feelings steer the course of their lives. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be like the cliff against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it." He didn't mean suppress emotion. He meant contain it, transform it into presence. We've been conditioned to believe that silence is weakness, that if we don't express every feeling, we're hiding. But some things are sacred precisely because they're private. Keeping something to yourself doesn't mean shame. It means protection. Silence can't be dissected. It can't be pitied or praised. It demands space. It creates mystery. And mystery, in a world addicted to constant access, feels threatening. Carl Jung once wrote, "Solitude is for me a fount of healing which makes my life worth living." That's the truth. Not every kind of healing needs to be visible. Some of the deepest transformations happen when no one is watching. When you sit with your thoughts, when you choose not to respond, not to prove, not to explain, when you simply let your emotions pass through without needing to be seen, liked, or validated. That's not suppression, that's sovereignty. It's easy to mistake the loud for the strong, but strength isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet, still, completely uninterested in being understood. You don't have to prove your growth. You don't have to narrate your healing in real time. You can keep it to yourself and let the results speak later. That patience, that refusal to perform, is what gives you power. Because it means your peace isn't up for public negotiation. There's beauty in becoming unexplainable, in being someone who no longer shares every emotional bruise just to receive softness in return. You learn that not everyone deserves access to your struggle, not because you're hiding, but because you've stopped offering your pain as currency for connection. When you stop broadcasting your wounds, you stop attracting those who only came to observe the damage, and slowly you begin to attract people who respect what you've built in silence. Seneca wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." And once you've faced adversity, truly, you no longer need to display the scars. You no longer need to reopen old wounds for others to understand your strength. You've proven it to yourself, and that's enough. Part 4. Guarding the inner life. The moment you realize your emotions are not currency for attention, you stop spending them so carelessly. You begin to guard your inner life like something rare, because it is. You start to see how much energy was wasted explaining what never needed to be explained. You feel how much power was lost in asking to be understood by people who couldn't even understand themselves. You begin to notice how the crowd celebrates vulnerability, but forgets that real vulnerability isn't exposure. It's discernment. It's knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. It's knowing who has earned the right to see the real you, and who only gets the surface. You don't need the world to validate your feelings for them to matter. You don't need to turn your pain into performance just to justify why it hurts. You can hold that pain quietly. You can heal without witnesses. You can grieve without applause. And when you do, something sacred happens. You stop fearing silence. You begin to feel at home inside it, because it no longer feels like abandonment, it feels like return. A return to yourself, a return to what's real. There's nothing wrong with expression, but when expression becomes performance, it steals your power. Sovereignty begins the moment you choose presence over performance, the moment you stop explaining yourself to feel safe, the moment you realize your peace is not fragile, it's forged. And when others can no longer predict you through your emotional patterns, they begin to respect the depth they can't access. Not because you became colder, but because you became wiser. You don't owe anyone a front row seat to your healing. You don't need to bleed in public to prove you're human. Some truths are meant to be whispered only to yourself. That's not secrecy, that's maturity. In a world that glorifies noise, that kind of quiet becomes rebellion, a different kind of freedom. Rejection feels personal because it touches something primal, our need to belong, to be seen, to be accepted as we are. But often, what feels like rejection is actually redirection. You weren't dismissed because you lacked value. You were pushed aside because your depth couldn't be digested by shallow eyes. Your silence was mistaken for absence. Your self-containment for coldness. You were misunderstood, not because you failed to express, but because you speak a frequency most people aren't tuned to. That doesn't make you wrong, it makes you rare. The world prefers simplicity. It rewards what's easy to label, easy to consume, easy to predict. And when you refuse to fit into those boxes, you become inconvenient. And inconvenience, in a world obsessed with efficiency, is often discarded before it's understood. It's easy to internalize that as a flaw, to think, if I was softer, louder, simpler, maybe they'd accept me. But that's the trap. The belief that your worth depends on how legible you are to others. Carl Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who others can easily understand, not who fits the mold, but who you are when no one is watching." When you stop performing for approval and start aligning with truth, that kind of authenticity costs comfort. It invites misunderstanding. It demands solitude. But it also creates transformation, the kind that's driven by alignment, not applause. There comes a time when rejection stops feeling like loss and starts feeling like clarity. Every person who overlooks you, every silence that follows your presence, it all reveals something. Not about your worth, but about where your energy doesn't belong. That insight saves years of confusion. It teaches you where to invest your effort and where to let go. Once you learn that, you stop chasing explanations. You stop wondering why someone didn't choose you. You realize not being chosen was a blessing because it gave you back to yourself. There's a revolution that begins when you stop trying to be understood. You start redirecting all that energy inward into building something real, something that doesn't need to be explained, something that stands on its own. You shift from emotional scarcity, always trying to prove your worth, to psychological sovereignty, where your existence is no longer up for debate. That's when your center of gravity moves inward. You're not moved by approval. You're not rattled by dismissal. You become grounded, and grounded people are magnetic. Not because they chase attention, but because they carry stability in a world that spins too fast. People will still misread you. They'll create stories to make sense of your quiet, your ambition, your boundaries. Let them. You're not responsible for correcting every misunderstanding. Marcus Aurelius said, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject." You are the subject, and most people don't know you. Not really. They see fragments, projections, reflections, and while that used to bother you, now you see it for what it is: noise. When you let go of the need to correct the noise, your focus sharpens, you sleep deeper, you move cleaner, because now your life isn't built around being perceived correctly. It's built around being lived truthfully. There's peace in that. You stop wasting energy explaining your silence. You stop justifying why you walked away. You stop decoding your boundaries for people who never honored them. You just live them, not as defense, but as discipline, as self-respect. You become someone who moves with conviction, not commentary. Rejection becomes revelation when you realize it didn't shrink you. It sculpted you. It showed you where not to go, who not to become, what not to settle for. Every closed door clarified direction. Every silence refined your voice. Every betrayal deepened your discernment. What once felt like exile now feels like space. Space to build, space to breathe, space to become. Not someone acceptable, but someone undeniable. And that shift, from wanting to be seen to choosing to become, changes everything. You stop speaking to be heard. You start speaking to build. You stop walking into rooms to prove your worth. You walk in already knowing it. You stop asking, "Am I too much?" and start asking, "Is this space too small for my truth?" You stop apologizing for your depth. You start protecting it. That's not arrogance, that's arrival. People talk about loneliness as if it's something to escape, as if the absence of others means the absence of worth. But solitude, when chosen with intention, is not isolation, it's transformation. It doesn't shrink you, it burns away everything that doesn't belong. At first, it feels like silence, heavy, echoing silence, where the world's noise fades and only your thoughts remain. But slowly, that silence sharpens. It becomes a mirror that doesn't lie. And what you see there, in the absence of distraction, is not your weakness, it's your foundation. Solitude doesn't destroy you, it reveals you. Beneath the noise, beneath the craving for validation, beneath the performances you didn't even realize you were giving, something real waits. When the noise finally burns off, you meet yourself honestly. Not the version you curated for others, but the one that's been whispering underneath it all. And that, for many, is the most terrifying part. Because when there's no one left to impress, no one left to chase, you're left with the truth. No performance, no edits, just you. And while that might feel like loss at first, it's actually the beginning of freedom. Epictetus wrote, "It's not things that disturb us, but our judgment of them." In solitude, those judgments become visible. You begin to see how many of your fears were borrowed, how many of your beliefs were inherited, how much of your identity was built on avoiding rejection instead of pursuing truth. This is where the internal alchemy begins. The discomfort doesn't disappear. It transforms. What once felt like loneliness starts to feel like privacy. What once felt like exile starts to feel like clarity. You begin to hear your own voice, louder than the world's opinions, and that voice, uncensored and unpolished, becomes your compass. You begin to understand that peace isn't found in a full room, it's found in full presence. It's being able to sit with yourself and not flinch, to feel the weight of your own mind and not run from it. That's not detachment, that's mastery. Carl Jung said, "The man who looks outside dreams, the man who looks inside awakes." Solitude forces you to look inward, to awaken, and with that awakening comes responsibility. You can no longer blame the noise for your confusion. You can't blame others for your stagnation. It's just you now. And that's where the power begins. Because when you stop externalizing your life, you reclaim the ability to direct it. You stop waiting for someone to save you. You stop waiting to be validated or guided. You start building your compass from within. And that compass points to something sturdier than attention. It points to integrity. Most people avoid solitude because they don't like what they feel when everything else is stripped away. But that discomfort, that raw honesty, is exactly what makes it sacred. You don't become strong by avoiding yourself. You become strong by sitting with yourself, by confronting what's unhealed, unclear, and uncertain without an audience. That's the difference between isolation and solitude. Isolation is running away. Solitude is running deeper. And in that deeper place, resilience is formed quietly, consistently, without applause. You start making decisions differently, not from a place of, will this be accepted, but from, does this align? You begin to trust your instincts more because you've spent time with them, long enough to separate intuition from insecurity. And that kind of self-knowledge, it can't be taught. It can only be earned through silence, through stillness, through the sacred act of simply being with yourself. That kind of clarity doesn't shout, it doesn't announce itself, but people feel it. They feel it in the way you speak, in the way you move, in the way you no longer chase what used to pull you apart. Solitude sharpens your boundaries. You stop saying yes to avoid disappointing others. You stop engaging in conversations that drain your spirit. You learn that no is not unkind, it's honest. And honesty, when cultivated in solitude, becomes a way of living. You don't need to prove anything anymore. You don't need to justify your focus, your distance, or your silence. You simply live it, because you've done the work in private, and now your energy speaks for itself. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Solitude helps you see the difference. It pulls you out of imagined disasters, out of false narratives, out of borrowed fears, and plants you firmly in what's real. And in that soil, something unshakable grows. A sense of self that doesn't shift with trends. A direction that doesn't wobble when misunderstood. A strength that isn't loud, but lasting. When you return to the world after solitude, you come back different. Not distant, but deliberate. Not bitter, but boundaried. You don't speak to be heard. You speak because your words rise from stillness. You're not easily swayed, not easily shaken, because you know the ground you stand on. You built it yourself, one quiet moment at a time. So no, solitude isn't punishment. It's preparation. It's training for self-trust, self-respect, and self-direction. It's not where life ends. It's where it begins to deepen. And the person who's learned to walk through their own mind, alone and awake, becomes someone the world can't easily move, because they don't belong to the noise anymore. They belong to themselves. Narrator. Part 6. The Death of the Old Self. There comes a quiet turning point in every life when the version of you that once felt essential begins to fall apart. Not with a crash, but with a slow, undeniable erosion. The old self, the one who needed approval, who bent to fit into spaces too small, who rehearsed words just to be liked, that self begins to feel heavy, outdated, false. You try to carry it a little longer, out of habit, out of fear, maybe even guilt. But it drags. It stiffens. Eventually, it begins to rot. That's not failure. That's evolution. When something dies within you, it isn't always a loss. Sometimes, it's the first breath of something deeper, the start of a more honest existence. At first, it's disorienting. You don't quite feel like yourself anymore, but you also can't go back. The mask doesn't fit. The old patterns exhaust you. You say less, but what you say carries more weight. You stop explaining, not because you have nothing to say, but because you no longer need to be understood by everyone. The chase for approval fades. In its place grows something steady, something still. You begin to move with intent. You stop filling silence out of nervousness. You stop performing your personality to make others comfortable. You stand differently, still, watchful, unmoved. And people notice. They sense something's changed. Some distance themselves. Others ask, "What happened to you?" They'll say, "You seem colder, more distant, less fun." But what they're really feeling is that you've stopped making yourself available for emotional labor you never agreed to. You've withdrawn from the performance, the constant reassurance, the endless self-editing to keep others comfortable. And that absence unsettles them, because you're no longer predictable. And unpredictability in someone who once conformed feels threatening. But here's the truth. That version of you needed to go. It needed to fall away so you could finally move freely, so you could stop editing your truth to fit someone else's story. Carl Jung once wrote, "We cannot change anything unless we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses." You didn't kill your old self out of hate. You released it out of truth. You stopped condemning your need for space. You stopped apologizing for craving solitude. You stopped hiding your desire for a simpler, quieter strength. And in that acceptance, the old self dissolved, not as punishment, as passage. You don't need to explain that process. The ones meant to understand will. The ones who don't were never meant to walk beside this version of you. You begin to notice who respects your silence and who only loved your noise. You start to see who valued your essence and who only loved your accessibility. That clarity hurts, but it's necessary. It separates the seasonal from the lifelong. It refines your circle. It clears the emotional clutter you once kept out of politeness. And in that clearing, something sacred grows: alignment. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That's what the disappearance of your old self is. It feels like loss, but it's actually the opening of a path where you no longer chase connection, you attract it. A path where you don't need to be known by many to feel known within yourself. You stop searching for mirrors in others, you find your own reflection, and it's enough. There's something sacred about becoming someone who no longer needs to announce their change. You don't post about it, you don't campaign for recognition, you just live differently, and the difference becomes impossible to ignore. People feel it in your energy, in your detachment from the noise, in the calmness that can't be faked, because it was earned in the quiet dismantling of your former self, in the nights you doubted everything but still chose to continue, in the moments where you wanted to explain but chose instead to evolve. You're no longer triggered by the same things, no longer drawn to the same conversations, no longer hungry for the same validation. At first that feels like loneliness, then it becomes something else: freedom. Because you realize you were never truly connected to those things. You were connected to who you had to become to survive them. And now, that person is gone. Seneca said, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." This isn't just a mindset shift, it's a rebirth. And like all rebirths, it's quiet at first, underrated, uncelebrated, but deeply real. And with time, it becomes undeniable, not because you announce it, but because you embody it. You move with quiet authority. You live your values instead of explaining them. Your absence speaks as clearly as your presence once did, not out of pride, but out of peace. The old self was necessary. It learned, it endured, it got you here. You owe it gratitude, not loyalty. And now, in its place, you stand clearer, stronger, whole. No longer looking back for validation, no longer reaching forward in desperation, grounded, present, real. That's what it means to be impossible to categorize. To have stopped being what the world told you to be and started becoming who you were always meant to be. Because presence, true presence, doesn't come from how loudly you speak. It comes from how little you need to speak. There's a quiet power in someone who no longer needs to be understood to know they are complete. There's a kind of quiet power in someone who has stopped seeking validation, a weight in their stillness, a certainty in their silence. You feel it when they walk into a room and don't try to control the space. They simply are. They don't need to announce their presence because their energy already carries it. They don't push to be noticed, yet they're the one people watch. That's not arrogance, it's not performance, it's presence. It's the confidence of someone who no longer needs permission to exist. In a world obsessed with appearances, that kind of restraint is rare, and because it's rare, it's magnetic. You begin to realize that real strength isn't loud. It's not hidden, just uninterested in spectacle. It's the quiet that comes after you've met your fear and sat with it. It's the peace that comes after you've walked through pain without needing to turn it into a performance. True strength doesn't posture, it doesn't puff up, because it's not protecting insecurity, it's grounded in understanding. Carl Jung once said, "A man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them." When you've done that kind of internal work, it changes everything. It changes how you move, how you speak, how you listen, how often you choose not to. Because now silence has become a statement. You stop reacting to every opinion. You stop defending your every move. You let go of the compulsion to clarify yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. Not out of apathy, out of alignment. You understand now. If someone can't feel your value, no amount of words will make them see it. And if someone can feel your value, you won't need to convince them. So you conserve your energy. You speak only when it matters. And when you do, people listen. Not because you're louder, but because your words are earned. They carry weight because they come from stillness, not ego. That's the paradox of power. The less you demand it, the more it radiates. There's a kind of detachment that most people mistake for disinterest. But true detachment isn't distance, it's clarity. It means you can care deeply without clinging. You can engage fully without being absorbed. You can move through the world without losing yourself to it. And that clarity, that calmness under pressure, speaks louder than charisma ever could. Because when someone can't be shaken by judgment, can't be baited into outrage, can't be seduced by flattery or fear, they become immovable. And we don't just respect immovable people, we orient ourselves around them. They become anchors in a world of drift. That's what sets apart the grounded from the attention-hungry. The grounded don't compete for the spotlight, they carry their own light. They're not chasing compliments, not begging to be seen, not performing connection. They're building something deeper, quiet but lasting. Something that doesn't crumble when the applause fades. Something that doesn't shift with opinion. And people notice. They always do. Because in a culture addicted to noise, the steady become mysterious. The ones who don't explain themselves become unforgettable. The ones who no longer crave being liked become respected, even by those who don't understand them. That's the irony. When you stop trying to be impressive, you often become unforgettable, not because you shouted, but because your silence had depth, not because you dominated the room, but because you didn't need to. Epictetus said, "First, say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do." That's what quiet power is built on. You decide who you are, then you live it. Not for applause, but for alignment. Because once you embody what you believe, the world adjusts. It may resist at first, it may mislabel your calmness as coldness, your boundaries as arrogance, but that's fine. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to become someone that even misunderstanding can't move. When you no longer rely on people to affirm your worth, you free them from the burden of carrying your identity, and you free yourself from the constant tug of needing to be liked. That freedom makes you light. But in the eyes of others, it makes you heavy, because now your self-possession is undeniable. And that unsettles people who are still measuring themselves through others' eyes. When they meet someone who doesn't need the crowd, they're forced to face their own dependency on it. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one." That's the essence of commanding without words. You don't try to be impressive, you simply are. You embody what you value. You move from integrity, not image. And the irony? When you stop trying to be seen, you often become the one everyone sees. People confuse silence with passivity, but in truth, silence is strategy. It's what happens when you've realized that presence isn't about volume, it's about gravity. The less you need to prove, the more powerful your presence becomes. The less you chase, the more naturally things align around you. That's not magic, that's mastery. There's a strange freedom that arrives the moment you stop needing care. Not because you've gone numb, but because you've outgrown the illusion that your strength depends on how others treat you. The world no longer has the same power to shake you. Its silence doesn't scare you. Its applause doesn't seduce you. You begin to move from a different center, one that doesn't beg to be seen and doesn't crumble when ignored. That's the paradox. You only gain true power when you stop needing to be rescued. The Stoic return to self. There's a strange kind of freedom that appears the moment you stop needing care. Not because you've turned bitter, not because you've closed off, but because you've finally outgrown the illusion that strength must come from how others treat you. It's the quiet realization that your power was never meant to be borrowed. It was always meant to be built. And that changes everything. The world no longer has the same power to shake you. Its silence doesn't unsettle you. Its applause doesn't seduce you. You start to move from a deeper place, a center that doesn't ask for permission, doesn't beg to be seen, and doesn't fall apart when ignored. That's the paradox of Stoic power. You only gain control when you stop trying to control everything. You only become untouchable when you stop needing protection. For most of us, this shift happens slowly. One disappointment, one heartbreak, one unanswered message at a time. And with each, you start to see the pattern. You realize that care from others is a gift, not a guarantee. That understanding from others is beautiful, but never owed. You stop chasing emotional rescue. You stop outsourcing your peace, because every time you do, you hand over your power. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." It's that simple, and that difficult. Because the truth is, most people never claim that power. They spend their lives waiting for closure, for validation, for someone to finally understand them. But the Stoics would ask, what if no one ever does? Would you stop living? Would you stop becoming? Or would you finally take back what was always yours? This is where transformation becomes real. You stop explaining yourself to feel safe. You stop handing out pieces of your soul in exchange for temporary comfort. You no longer make yourself smaller to be digestible. You no longer dilute your truth to avoid tension. You simply stand in your life, unfolded, unedited, and let things fall where they may. Some people will fall away. Some will draw closer. But none of that changes who you are, because now you define your worth. You decide your value. You've stopped outsourcing your identity to the reactions of others, and that's why you're no longer fragile. You're rooted. This doesn't mean you stop feeling. It doesn't mean you walk untouched by the world. It means you no longer expect external care to fix what only internal clarity can. You stop making your healing a group project. You stop inviting others to validate your progress. You no longer need a mirror to see that you're whole, because the mirror is now internal, and it doesn't distort. And once you have that, you stop fearing disconnection, because the deepest connection, the one with yourself, has already been established. That's what makes you strong, not cold, not detached, but self-contained. People can come and go. You can love deeply and still remain whole. You can lose what once defined you and still not lose yourself. That's not withdrawal from life. It's engagement on your own terms. You've stopped being a guest in your own mind. You've become its architect. Marcus Aurelius said, "Your mind will take the shape of what you frequently hold in thought." And now, you've chosen your shape. You've built your foundation not on approval, but on awareness. That's what real freedom is. Not the absence of challenge, but the ability to remain steady through it. The storms still come, but you don't crumble. You adapt. You observe. You endure. And when your attention is no longer hooked by who notices, who cares, who claps, or who stays, you reclaim your most powerful resource, your energy. You stop asking, "Why did they treat me that way?" and start asking, "What can I build with what's left?" You turn pain into discipline, silence into strategy, disappointment into design, because you're not stuck anymore. You're not frozen, waiting for the world to approve your next move. You've become the current. You've become the builder. You realize you were never powerless. You were simply waiting for permission to be strong. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And that's where the final transformation begins. Not in becoming perfect, but in becoming whole. You accept your flaws, your fears, your unmet needs, your darkness, and your light. You accept that maybe they'll never understand you, and that's okay. You accept that some love will come and go, and that's okay too. You stop resisting what is, and in that surrender, you find the only control that ever mattered, the control over yourself. You stop breaking yourself into pieces for people who prefer fragments. You stop translating your truth into a language that was never meant for you. You stand, fully, finally, and in that standing, the world shifts around you. That's what Stoicism has always been about. Not suppression, not detachment, but sovereignty. It's the quiet revolution that happens when you stop waiting for life to hand you peace and start building it yourself. When you stop waiting for understanding and start practicing clarity. When you stop demanding softness and start embodying strength. Seneca wrote, "Most powerful is he who has himself in his own power." And that, right there, is the destination. You don't need to be seen to be powerful. You don't need to be understood to be whole. The moment you stop waiting for the world to care is the moment you become impossible to ignore. Not because you shouted, but because you became. So if you've made it here, thank you. Thank you for walking this path with me, for sitting in the silence, for choosing growth over noise. If this message spoke to you, there's another video on your screen right now that will take you even deeper. Watch it next. Keep building, keep becoming. Because this life, your life, is already yours, and you don't need anyone's permission to live it fully.